Netflix just released their live-action adaptation of Season 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and honestly, it's much better than I expected. After reading interviews and seeing trailers for weeks leading up to the release, I was really worried the show was going the way of most live-action remakes. Spoiler warning, this video is only going to contain minor spoilers for the ways the show has changed, but if you've never seen the cartoon Season 1, and you plan on going into the show completely blind, now is your chance to step out. Netflix's version of Avatar makes a lot of changes to the characters in terms of appearances, motivations, and even abilities, and surprisingly, most of these changes are for the better. Something that had me worried when we first heard about Netflix's take on the show was that Azula would be part of Season 1. For those that don't know, Azula ends up being the main antagonist of Season 2 of the cartoon and has no screen time in the first season. I was worried about Azula's appearance primarily because I thought it would be overwhelming to try to incorporate Azula as an antagonist alongside both Zuko and Zhao, who already made the role feel a bit stretched. I was delighted to learn that Azula actually doesn't make any appearances as an antagonist for the gang and instead operates in the background, mostly interacting with her friends Mai and Ty Lee as well as her father, Fire Lord Ozai. Despite maintaining her distance from the protagonists, Azula's presence in the main story is still felt in the motivations for both Zuko and Zhao in a way that I believe strengthens all three characters as well as Ozai. Unfortunately, I can't go any deeper into these characters' interactions without getting into some major spoilers, so I'll just have to leave you with that. Some of you may have heard that in Netflix's version, Sokka will no longer be a sexist at the beginning of the series. If you're like me, you heard this and thought, oh great, that probably means they're planning on gutting his original character arc. That sentiment could not be further from the truth. While I think Sokka's initial sexism could have been maintained without much outcry from modern fans, it is not necessary to reinforce his arc in Netflix's version of the show. Sokka still keeps roughly the same character arc, along with a bit of a new perspective in the form of a flashback, which I believe reinforces the slightly new direction that they are planning to take him. Hey there gang, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. If this video gets 50 likes, I'll do another video essay detailing all the changes they made to Zuko and how Netflix's version compares to Zuko in the cartoon. Thanks, now back to the video. Aang is another character who had seemed like he might get butchered by the new direction they are taking the show, but when the showrunners said that Aang would be taking his role a bit more seriously, they were a bit liberal with their meaning. Firstly, Aang still gets to be the same fun-loving kid we all know from the cartoon. The Netflix version contains several scenes of him just being a kid, playing games and enjoying life with other kids. However, Aang does give a lot more speeches about his role in the world and why he needs to remain intent on his mission as the Avatar, an issue of writing and dialogue that I will go over a bit more later in this video. Because of this, part of his original arc from the cartoon ends up a bit accelerated, with Aang seeming much closer to coming to terms with his Avatar duties by the end of the season. I do believe that the choice to give Aang fewer scenes, just having fun and being a kid, makes his character significantly weaker than he was in the original series, going from a deep character driven by his personal beliefs to a bit of a sanitized hero protagonist. Commander Zhao is back in Netflix's version, and he fills much the same role as he did in the cartoon, as the main antagonist to the gang and sometimes as an antagonist to Zuko. Zhao experienced a fair bit of deepening to his character, sometimes as a result of the inclusion of Azula and Ozai, but also due to simply devoting more character building scenes to him. He maintains the headstrong but cunning nature that he displayed in the cartoon and even gets a few more opportunities to shine. Yue is a character I certainly didn't expect to be paying so much attention to, but Netflix's version is much more fleshed out than in the cartoon. Both in her interactions with Sokka as well as her connection to the spirits, Yue is given room to breathe that simply wasn't present in the cartoon. She's even a waterbender in this version, which I found interesting because I had no idea whether she was or wasn't in the original, if that tells you anything about how unimportant to the story she seemed. Overall, I think the changes made to the characters in the Netflix version of the show are positive and add depth, although at points the writing and pacing hold back the characters from truly shining the way they do in the cartoon. The plot for the live-action version of Avatar is, at its core, about as solid as the original. A number of the original story beats come through in this version, despite a lot of changes to how things play out at each setting. One improvement that I am sure every fan of the cartoon is happy about is that the entirety of the Great Divide is reduced to a single throwaway line by a background character. A few other minor plot events and side stories are similarly absent or remixed to fit the format that Netflix is trying for. One thing that certainly hurts Netflix's version, however, is the pacing. Many episodes feel extremely rushed, jumping from plot point to plot point in order to reach the desired end. The series could definitely have benefited from an extra episode or two to allow the characters some time to breathe between major plot events. This was much less of an issue in the cartoon because there were many more segmented episodes, so much so that at times it dragged. I believe that a happy middle ground would have a little less runtime than the cartoon and a little more than the adaptation. Among the plot revisions that I actually preferred in the Netflix version was what they did with the spirits and the spirit world. Other than the minimization of Hey-Bye, I'll never stop complaining about the removal of Giant Panda Guy. I love him. The spirits keep their mystique from the original series but gain more screen time and feel more integrated with the world, rather than as plot devices that appear in one episode and are completely removed from the next. The Face Stealer spirit Ko gets a bit more screen time and backstory in Netflix's version that makes him seem more like a motivated character participating in the story, a change which I certainly appreciated. Another change is the interactions Aang has with the spirits of past avatars. Instead of feeling like minor deities, always more wise and connected with the world than any living characters, they all feel like their own people, who have found their own ways to deal with the problems of their eras. Avatar Kuruk, for example, actually plays a role in Aang's journey beyond a one-off mention, and even gets the opportunity to give Aang advice, although the advice he gives is clearly very bad. The presence of the past avatars and their influence over the way Aang views the world integrates them into the story in a way that the cartoon simply didn't do. Overall, I think that many of the changes to the plot were positive, but the writers clearly were struggling to fit everything they wanted into the short 8-episode run they were given. I think they really should have focused more on what they can cut so that the episodes don't always feel like exposition dump, fight scene, exposition, fight, and so on. The visuals for this adaptation are simply peak. Other than a few strange looking water or earthbending moments, every fight in the entire show has excellent choreography, visual effects, and set design. The settings are totally immersive in a way that the cartoon often could only manage for a short bit of each episode due to the limitations of drawn animation. The fire and air bending were especially highlights for me in a way that made every blast feel weighted and full. The earth and water bending also had their times to shine, although a bit less consistently than the others. The earthbending had the greatest breadth of quality, with some instances appearing real enough to be gauged in the actors' reactions, and others seeming like a PNG flying across the screen in a 2012 style YouTube video. Waterbending was very engaging on the VFX side, but often didn't seem to land on the actors in a way that water should, considering how heavy it is. One visual highlight for me was the final fight scene, which managed to effectively portray the massive influence of a waterfish kaiju destroying the Fire Nation fleet. Despite this, I still think the scene could have been shortened a bit to make some more breathing room for a few other scenes in the finale that desperately needed it, like the part where Zhao spends several scenes villain monologuing his evil plans to Iroh, only to be eliminated shortly thereafter. Overall, the visuals of the adaptation from the fight sequences to the city flyovers are masterful. So much so that I have no idea how M. Night's version went so horribly wrong. To wrap up every loose strand of Monster Ultra fueled rambling in this video, I'd like to say that I enjoyed my time watching this show. I don't believe it is actually better than the original season 1, but with a few tweaks to Netflix's current formula, I think the next 2 seasons can be made better. By lengthening the runtime, allowing major plot events some breathing room, and devoting a bit more effort to writing clean, witty dialogue, I believe that this series can be salvaged. The VFX team is already producing top-notch bending fight scenes, which I hope will continue in the future. I'll just leave you with this. Whether you're a fan of the original show or not, you can certainly enjoy what this adaptation has to offer. If you've never seen the cartoon, I'd recommend watching it before getting into the adaptation, purely so that you can understand what Netflix had to compete with in terms of quality storytelling. That's all from me for now. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the adaptation and my perspective, and I'll see you all next time!